So, hello and welcome everybody to another Sacred Wisdom podcast. In this podcast today, we are going to discuss Tartaria and Cathay. Now, China was once referred to as Cathay, if some of you know that, and you can look at the old maps and you can see all this, but it was referred to for medieval Europe as Cathay. And I'm joined with the incredible Stephen Denman again today, as always, and his amazing brother I have. So, hello, Stephen.
Hello, Zach. How are you?
I'm brilliant, my brother. Really good. And so let's just first of all talk a little bit about Cathay and the old kind of name that it was given, and then it was
Okay,
kind of
so
changed.
when it comes to Great Tartaria and the Old World Empire, we know that Cathay referred to Western China. It was also known on many of the maps for medieval Europe as Oriental Tartary. So it was fully integrated, I suppose, culturally and politically at some point, many centuries ago, into the civilization of Great Tartaria. At some point, obviously, there was a fragmentation. We've discussed the fragmentation of the civilization of Great Tartaria many, many times, so we don't really need to go back over that. So obviously, we know from the later maps that came out during the medieval age, we see, for example, you have Muscovite Tartary, which is in Western Russia. You have Great Tartary or Great Tartaria, and then you've got Oriental Tartary or Cathay, which is Western China.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and the subject we want to really talk about today is that this has come up a lot recently on YouTube, where people are talking about the Great Wall of China being part
Yes.
of Tartaria and was a defense built for Tartarians. Now, Stephen has done some amazing research as always, and not based on theory as so much of these people
No.
claim from just watching a few videos. But Stephen, do you want to sort of give an explanation? Just first of all, everybody, just the Great Wall of China is unbelievable. How it's 13,000 miles in length, and it is quite an incredible structure. But there is historical evidence to prove that this was not built from the Great Tartaria. So, Steve, go on. Let's go.
Yeah. So just to kind of encapsulate the whole situation with this kind of research. So I was looking into this whole sort of posited like concept that Great Tartaria, had some kind of connection with the Great Wall of China. Somehow it was constructed by the Nordic Tartarians for some reason for defensive purposes. And I just thought, well, okay, well, I'm going to go and just look at the technical details of that and, really look at the historical narratives. And it's completely incorrect. The Great Wall of China was not constructed as part of the civilization of Great Tartaria and the Old World Empire. And what we know is there were numerous segments to the Great Wall of China, and its actual and the initial conception, if you like, of the rudimentary stages of construction of the Great Wall of China go far, far back, into the classical period. For example, we know that King Zhao Yuan of the Western Zhao dynasty in eastern central China, he began the construction of the initial Great Wall of China on the 15th of October, 794 BC.
Wow.
So that's got absolutely nothing to do with the historical timelines that are given for the emergence of the political and cultural basis that defined the civilization of Great Tartaria and the Old World Empire that had arisen out of northern Russia.
So, from what I've seen on YouTube and the various videos and people explaining about the Great Wall of China being connected to Tartaria, they're saying that the windows were facing towards China. So this was acting as a defense for Great Tartaria, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and you've looked into this, and I want your information on it. So
Yeah, they were just types of construction features that were commonplace in dynastic China at the time. We have to remember that the actual sections of the Great Wall of China that you're referring to, those architectural features, date back to when those sections of the Great Wall of China were constructed from the 16th of April, 1372. So this was, if you actually go and look at Chinese architecture in many of the townships and the cityscapes across mainland China during the medieval age, you will see that it was very commonplace on many of their fortifications to have those types of protruding windows, window ledges, constructed on the outer surfaces of those buildings. There's nothing that indicates whatsoever that was done, because the occupants of Great Tartaria in the Old World Order were trying to keep guard on the Great Wall of China to stop Orientals from somehow invading their civilization. That is, to me, is absolutely ludicrous, and all it is a completely fictional interpretation without any basis in any kind of historical narrative whatsoever. And
Mm.
again, when it comes to understanding the civilization of Great Tartaria and Northern Russia, we must take a balanced approach to looking at all the information. And one of the things that we can say throughout the Sacred Wisdom podcast, we will say, I'm putting this out there, so it's only speculation. I'm putting that thought out there. We're not going around saying, yes, we are right. Yes, we are 100% correct.
I think it's
There's
very
a lot of
dangerous when
people.
people do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And in the New Age movement, we have far too many individuals putting out rather bogus video content with very bad research,
Mm.
such with the Great Wall of China, not really understanding anything to do with military tactics, with warfare from the medieval age, and really not doing the research into the actual historical narratives, the factual narratives when it comes to the various construction stages of the Great Wall of China. And, so I hear this also being said about, for example, the traveler Marco Polo, that,
Mm.
there's people who've even said that when he went traveling across the Asian continent, that he observed this Great Wall of China, which is absolute rubbish. There is nothing in any of his historical accounts that is listed as stating that he saw the Great Wall of China. So what we know is with Marco Polo is that he traveled along the Silk Road from the 15th of October 1271 to the 14th of August 1295. Now, we know that he did travel across Cathay, or you can call it Oriental Tartary, Western China. He did not at all list anywhere that he had observed the Great Wall of China. And the reason why he hadn't is, as I've just mentioned, that the actual architectural features that everybody sees now, that tourists go and visit from the United States of America, from Canada, the United Kingdom of Great Britain, and Europe and other countries, was actually only constructed from the 16th of April 1372 and onward. So there's no
Right.
way that he could have seen that, because it was over 100 years earlier. It hadn't even been constructed yet.
Right.
So here we have a classic example of people not doing the research,
Mm.
and then just repeating what other people have said, other individuals who so-called researchers, and putting out the video content, as part of the New Age movement. And I know a lot of individuals out there probably aren't going to like what I'm saying when it comes to, the civilization of Great Tartaria and the Great Wall of China. The Great Wall of China, it has absolutely nothing to do with the civilization of Great Tartaria or the Old World Empire, in the sense of being a defensive fortification to prevent Orientals from somehow invading the landmass of the Nordic Tatarians and the Turkic peoples. It's completely bogus. It's just been repeated so much, it's just become accepted as fact.
With Marco Polo, what was going on? So there was
So
more.
we have to remember that the account of his travels on the Asian continent, including obviously in mainland China, was all written down in a book that's translated in the English language into the title of The Book of the Marvels of the World, that was published in 1302. Now we
Yeah.
have to remember that this document that's supposedly supposed to be factual, remember it was published in 1302, right?
Yeah.
So again, this is before the construction of the architectural features in the main sections of the Great Wall of China that tourists in the modern age are used to seeing and photographing and film. We've seen all on the television and so forth.
Yeah.
So it was an Italian Romance novelist known as Rustichello Santuccio Calazzo da Pisa, who most knew at the time as Rusticiano Santuccio Calazzo. Now, he was an Italian Romance novelist. Okay, so he was not an officially recognized historian or chronicler,
Mm.
who therefore he wasn't a biographer. He was a romance novelist, so he was a bit of a fantasist. He
Mm.
was great with his imagination, but this individual was actually writing these events long after Marco Polo had returned to the Italian peninsula from the Asian continent.
Mm.
So so again, it's completely unfounded, and the timelines do not match up. So there's no way that Marco Polo, I mean, he was listed in the Book of the Marvels of the World as of having observed what appears to be the Great Wall of China. And then you get conspiracy theorists and certain people who are researchers, in the alternative media and the New Age movement that pile out all this video content saying, well, Marco Polo actually saw it. It must have existed. So therefore, it's got to be connected to Great Tartaria. I mean,
So, but the official story of the wall of Great Wall of China was a defense system, wasn't it? No, the Great Wall of China has become the kind of benchmark between the 18th and 20th century. It's the Great Wall has become the emblem of China, isn't it?
So we firstly we just need to really understand one aspect with the Great Wall of China. It was built in many sections over many centuries. It wasn't a
Yes.
one. So we know there are at least 14 or 15 different versions of the Great Wall of China in various segments, built in different locations over thousands of years by dynastic emperors in mainland China. So again, none of that's really discussed by the conspiracy theorists who want to believe everything on planet Earth was built as part of the civilization of Great Tartaria. But what we know is there was a treaty, and then this treaty was called the Treaty of Nerchinsk of 1689. This was
Right.
signed by the Tsardom of Russia and the Qing dynasty. That's Qing of mainland China. This is the reason it was constructed. That this is the version that you see today. The those beautiful architectural features that so many tourists recognize, because it was constructed to formally identify the exact borders of Imperial Russia and dynastic China. Now, the Treaty of
Right.
Nerchinsk was
Okay.
signed on the 27th of August, 1689, in the town of Nerchinsk in the Zabaykalsky Krai of southeastern Russia. Now, both the signatories were apparently the royal minister known as Sueto Hussery or Songotu Hussery on behalf of the Kangxi emperor called Heisin Gyoro Zhangyi.
Right.
Okay,
Wow.
so that's
Wow.
we've got to remember, and it was also signed by Count Fyodor Alexeyevich Golovin on behalf of the Russian Tsar, who many know as Peter the First and Peter the Great.
Interesting.
So
Interesting.
again, none of that's discussed. All that information has just been sidelined. Nobody's interested in hearing it, and it's ridiculous. So therefore, we have to understand that the most recently upgraded version of the Great Wall of China, which some people like to call the Great Wall of Tartaria, was actually built to function as the boundary line that delineated, northern Russia and what once was really in on a much wider sense Great Tartaria from what became Cathay or Western China or Oriental Tartary. So it was really a geopolitical
Right.
measure.
Okay.
It wasn't designed to prevent invading enemies from taking over a landmass. It was designed to say, that's yours, this is ours, and this huge edifice that goes on for thousands of kilometers, we can call the Great Wall of China, defines that. That's all it was designed to do.
I mean, I don't know, but is the other sections of the wall that aren't used for the tourist locations? Are they built out of stone? Are they built in the
Yes,
same
but
way?
they if you go and look at again, if you go to Yandex and do or go to one of the other search engines, you do the research, what you find is they're just piles of rock. I mean, going on for miles and miles of rock, but they've disintegrated over many centuries because they weren't maintained as a fortification. But
Right.
they are the original bases or forms of the Great Wall of China. You can probably see them as prototypes of the contemporary version of the Great Wall of China that everybody is used to seeing today, film and television, that tourists, as I said, from the United States, America, and Canada, the United Kingdom of Great Britain, mainland Europe, and elsewhere regularly go to if they're really interested in Oriental culture and want to see, one of the wonders of the world. And the Great Wall of China is an incredible feat of technical engineering. There's no two ways about that. But it certainly has nothing to do with Great Tartaria in the sense that somehow the individuals of that civilization had built this vast edifice to keep out the marauding sort of hordes that were on the other side. It's just ludicrous, really
It
quite
doesn't kind
ludicrous.
of add up in the sense a wall like that anyway to stop that. It makes more sense to be a borderline and a way of,
Yeah,
really kind of territory
yeah.
and there's a matter of respect between China and Russia anyway. They
Yeah,
don't,
there's a
you
very,
know,
very long-term historical relationship between, at the time what was Imperial Russia, but even when you go back to medieval Russia with dynastic China, we have to remember that the dynastic China had such a vast history, well over 5,000 years of history, not just not just with the emperors, but going back to the time of the provincial kings of China.
mm,
So it's very complex, and what you find is with a lot of the researchers and the alternative media and the New Age movement, all these conspiracy theorists, they just basically so desperate to sort of say, yeah, that was great Tartaria. It's a bit like just saying, yeah, every starfall on planet Earth does. I
yeah,
don't, they just ignore any historical narrative. Oh, it's all built by the Nordic Tatarians and the Turkic peoples. I don't care about the official historical narratives. And we've reiterated, yes, some of them possibly were built over the remnants of older
mm.
star forts. And this is similar situation with the Great Wall of China. It just wasn't built by the civilization of Great Tartaria. It was actually the Chinese people that were actually tasked with building and rebuilding and maintaining the Great Wall of China. So again, none of this is given any kind of consideration. It's just people just making a lot of generic opinions without any factual information. And I would say this, when it comes to the Great Wall of China that so many seem to be desperate to call the Great Wall of Tartaria, there's only two aspects to the conveyance of this information. Either those individuals are woefully ignorant of the actual historical facts to do with the Great Wall of China and are spreading disinformation, or what is taking place is they know damn well the Great Wall of China has nothing to do with Great Tartaria and the Old World Empire, and it was actually built by the Chinese people for the dynastic emperors. Yeah, and therefore, if they know that, they're deliberately spreading misinformation.
So bringing it back to Cathay. So,
Yeah,
in the sense of, what happened there in the sense, has it always been called Cathay and then it got updated to China? Obviously you got Cathay Pacific Airline as well. That's sort of the remnants of Cathay. You still have
yeah.
that existing. So what are your views on that in the sense of Cathay? Obviously, because it appeared goes back on the maps. I think between the 16th and 17th centuries when it started changing.
I think you have to look at the Silk Road. The Silk Road was always the access route, and this is what really I think Marco Polo found fascinating in his travels on the Asian continent, was that the Silk Road obviously enters into what is now known as Western China. It comes through that was then called Cathay, and or Oriental Tartary, as it was originally also known on many of the maps of medieval Europe. So we know that it was a vast landmass, extremely rich in resources. It was a place where there were thousands of marketplaces in the towns and the other urban dwellings of Western China. And yes, at one point, if you go far enough back into the historical narrative, Oriental Tartary or Western China or Cathay was fully politically and culturally integrated into Great Tartaria, which itself had arisen out of northern Russia.
Yeah.
So it's a fragmentation process that had occurred politically and culturally over many many generations. The same as what happened with Muscovite Tartary, in Western Russia.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we know that for all world mythology and world folklore, there are many tales that describe how Homo sapiens or human beings descended from the far away north. If you go far enough back into the antediluvian period, far enough back into the upper Paleolithic, we're going back into vast epochs of time, and we know that the climate was much more temperate in the Arctic North Polar region. We know that there were the white cities of Great Tartaria most certainly existed. As I've mentioned many times before, there's a lot of intrigue now and interest from academics in the Russian Federation as to what is going on or has been going on for many generations in the remotest parts of the faraway north, in the Arctic North Polar region, across the northern Russian coast. It's very, very interesting.
There's
That
so
whole
many. I
geographic
mean, what I
expanse.
we've talking about in Oriental resonators, but the pyramids,
Mm,
the Chinese pyramids, there are
yeah.
I mean, really a lot over there. And really quite
Yes.
difficult to find information on them. And it is
Yes.
popping up. I'm seeing people put information out on them, which is incredible.
You see, when it comes to, whether it's Chinese pyramids, there's even remnants of Greek pyramids that
Wow.
have been found. Yeah, and obviously we've all, I think most of us are quite aware of the Bosnian pyramids, the Pyramid of the Sun or the Solar Pyramid, the
Yeah.
Pyramid of the Moon or the Lunar Pyramid in the Visoko Valley
Yeah.
in central Bosnia and southeastern Europe. What we're seeing there's a lot of data that shows or indicates these were telluric electricity absorbers and transmitter type devices, or
Mm.
ether units,
Yeah.
as I think some of the star forts also were, but they were designed to absorb piezoelectric currents from saltwater or saline water
Yeah.
around them. So yes, I think, when it comes to the Great Wall of China, it's such a mundane subject. It can't be put in there with the more highfalutin sort of conspiracy theories to do with Great Tartaria and the Old World Empire. And that, I think, that's problematic for a lot of conspiracy theorists. They want to fantasize about everything and a lot
Yeah.
everything when it comes to Great Tartaria, everything, any kind of ornate edifice. Yeah, that had to have been constructed with Tartarian architecture, with the kinds of occult technology they had. On some occasions, yes, but it doesn't mean the whole of planet Earth was under the rulership of Great Tartaria.
Yeah.
There would have been vast
There's
expanses
other
which weren't,
civilizations, of course.
and isolated communities. But
Yeah.
yeah, everything disseminated or originated from the faraway north, the Arctic North Polar region.
Mm.
And we see this obviously there's a lot of anomalous remains and artifacts that have been located in the polar Urals and the northern Urals of the Yamal-Nenets Autonomous Okrug of north central Russia, as just a single example. So
Mm.
yes, there's a lot of unanswered questions about the distant past. And yes, so there was a tremendous political and cultural unity with the arising of the civilization of Great Tartaria and the Old World Empire, but it then fragmented, as I said, before, over many generations. And this could be seen with the emergence of Cathay or Western China or Oriental Tartary.
Mm.
And with this arising came the need to create a much more extended, more permanently featured Great Wall of China as a geopolitical borderline or delineation line that said, that's your territory there, northern Russia, Western Russia, Eastern Russia, etc. And this is the delineation line that says this is mainland China. We are separate from you. That's really all it was.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Interesting.
as I
And
said, earlier on. So,
do you think, just bringing it up to speed now with the Cathay Pacific airline you have,
right,
obviously the aeroplane company,
yeah.
why do you, obviously that still it connects to Cathay and the
Well,
name
yeah.
Cathay,
I
but
mean,
what?
it's still a word in terms of in terms of a lexicon. It's still a word that is used amongst individuals. Whether they are the Chinese people, whether they're from Japan or from South Korea or another country on the Asian continent. It's not an unknown word.
Mm.
So it is commercially viable, obviously, for that Pacific airline. I just want to say that, I mean, the research I did was extremely intricate and detailed, and I did kind of I actually gave a really progressive chronology and timeline to do with the various stages of construction of the Great Wall of China by various dynastic emperors, and it's so intricate to go into. There's no way that we could cover all this in this Sacred Wisdom podcast, because it
Yeah.
is really historical narrative wise, it's very intense information. So yeah, so I just, albeit to say, when you do the research, it is quite amazing when you go see how far back the industrious Chinese people have, gone with the development of the Great Wall of China. It's an incredibly long-term fortification, but it wasn't designed to keep the Russian people away from Western China, or the Chinese people away from sort of Eastern Russia. It was just a geopolitical demarcation that was placed there to really assert this is where our territory, is, and that's where your territory is.
The
That's all it
interesting
was.
thing is, though, in the history does explain it to be a defense wall. I mean, in the official narrative, it
Yeah,
is.
well, no, I understand that. We're talking about the version that's seen today. That's what I'm referring to. So
Yeah, right.
the most in the modern age that we see today, as I said, that was, it was not constructed, 2000, 3000, whatever, 4000 years ago. The version that we see today, and I had, as I'll reiterate, we know that Marco Polo traveled along the Silk Road and into mainland China from the 15th of October 1271 to the 14th of August 1295.
Yeah,
Now, we know that he didn't see the Great Wall of China because the construction of the version that we see today, that was ongoing for many
yeah,
centuries, but it began on the 16th of April 1372, which is why the Book of the Marvels of the World, that was actually written by Rusticello Santuccio Collazo de Pisa, who a lot of people seem to know as Rusticiano Santuccio Collazo, is largely a massive historical distortion, as it was published in 1302. Now, if he had actually sat, and actually discussed the actual document with Marco Polo, who had obviously returned to the Italian peninsula, he would have then realized that it hadn't been built, because it wasn't actually the construction of what we now know as the Great Wall of China and its greatest extensity didn't begin until over 100 years later. So it's completely ludicrous, and yet people hang on to the Book of the Marvels of the World in 1302 as though it's some sort of
His,
it's a
historical
really credible
document.
piece of evidence, and it's not. It really is
There's
not
some
a
very
credible.
interesting images in there. You have the dog people, you have all sorts of
Yeah.
weird, and it makes complete sense. He was a fantasist, the novelist, the guy
Well,
that
he was
wrote.
he was a romance novelist, as I said. So
Yeah,
he had a furtive imagination. It's complete lunacy.
I'm not saying there wasn't some strange things. I'm sure Marco Polo did
Yeah.
encounter some very strange events,
Look, to be
but
fair, on the document that was written, it was a mixture of fact and fiction all rolled into one, basically.
yeah,
And it was
yeah,
done to sensationalize the travels of Marco Polo to initially an audience of Italian people in Southern Europe, and then obviously was translated into other languages such as French, and then eventually the English language,
yeah,
because it's fantastical. It's like, wow, this is incredible.
yeah.
But it was largely fictional in places.
But interesting, and everybody, yeah, do check out, what Stephen's saying about the history of that, and actually look into it. Stephen has done extensive, and we could, as we said, we could go on for a lot longer,
Yeah.
but it will just be rolling off information, and I
And I
think,
do, I do want to reiterate that very clearly. Yes, I mean, we just want to reiterate the earliest versions of the Great Wall of China were used as defensive fortifications. I
right,
mentioned earlier that King Zhao Yuan of the Western Zhao dynasty in eastern central China began construction of the very initial kind or version of the Great Wall of China on the 15th of October, 794 BC. Now, the reason that he did this was to protect the Western Zhao kingdom of China against the incursions by the Scythian Aryans, Turkic peoples, Mongolian tribes, and there was
right,
also
okay,
an extensive amount of feuding amongst the Oriental kings of the Zhao monarchy and certain Chinese warlords. So there was a lot of geopolitical fragmentation in Cathay or Western China or Oriental Tartary that was going on.
Hmm.
And therefore, this is what urged the construction by King Zhao Yuan of the Western Zhao dynasty in East Central China to go ahead and actually start the construction of the earliest phases of the Great Wall of China.
Hmm.
But that, yeah, so it's actual, the reasons for the Great Wall of China obviously changed over time, and then it obviously became it just became a geopolitical borderline between imperial Russia and dynastic China.
It's kind of a bit stupid to think it would just have been used purely as a defense wall, a 13,000 miles of wall
Yeah.
to build it would be, but it makes more sense as a borderline to almost like
Well, the height
an
changes.
agreement to
Yeah.
that land, you know?
And the heights do vary on the Great Wall of China. It's not a standard height for that entire extensity through
Right.
through the Chinese mainland. So that in itself should be noted. So even if it had been used consistently only as a fortification, it could have been breached quite easily by individuals of soldiers or militia that quite easily get over some sections of the Great Wall of China if they really wanted to. So it was
Yep.
just basically used as an edifice that defined the geopolitical border, as I've said, between Imperial Russia and dynastic China in its later phases.
And so much in Chinese history, it'd be amazing to. It is quite incredible,
Incredibly
and it's
intricate. It
very
really
kept
is.
from the West. There's a lot
Yeah.
taken back, and this is the problem we have: is withholding of information. It creates again all these distortions and gets people battling amongst themselves, misinformation, disinformation, and you have to look into things really to really find it out. And I'm honoured to have you as a brother, Stephen, because you bring this information to me and help me see the way the world is, and not some hokey pokey conspiracy. Everything is a lie or a conspiracy, and that's what we have to remember. It's not all. There's been these alterations that have created, and I think we always relate it back, but the Dark Ages set
Mm.
that tone. There was a point of
Yeah.
a power grab of people that wanted to take
Well, of
certain.
course, because the Dark Ages really essentially in the early medieval period arose out of the remnants and the collapse of the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
And so the actual, as we know, the Roman Catholic Church and everything that came after, therefore decided that it had to, absorb and bring into itself all this different kinds of knowledge, including aspects of occult technology, and keep
Yeah.
it away from public access.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was a vast loss of what would have been originally readily accessible knowledge
Mm.
to Homo sapiens or human beings, and then there was a controlled filtering of and dissemination of who would be given access to
Yeah.
that knowledge over many generations, and then you could say the rest is history.
Yeah, and it kind of got like that, it's and then we bring it up to the 17th, 18th, 19th century, the Victorian, and that's where everything was kind of reshaped, and that we had this reshaping of science. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of questions being thrown up at this now. And
Mm.
Steve, is there anything else you'd like to add for this
I,
podcast?
I would love to have gone into even further detail on all the other dynastic emperors and the various various versions of the Great Wall of China they constructed, but it's very intricate. And again, when you do the research into the documents and the chronological records to do with the Great Wall of China, it's not listed anywhere that they were trying to keep out the occupants of Great Tartaria or
It
anything that.
would be, wouldn't it? This is the thing. There would be little slices of that at least.
And there's nothing. So it's not as though Great Tartaria, even in that sense itself, was viewed in any negative perception by the Chinese people.
Mm,
Let alone the farcical idea that the Nordic Tatarians and the Turkic peoples were trying to keep out the Chinese people by building the so-called Great Wall of Tartary. It's complete and utter. It's completely ridiculous, all of it.
and this is the thing. I think people think that everything is a lie to some
Mm.
level. I mean, there's certain elements that have
I
been lied
understand
to.
that. I understand
Yeah.
people are very cynical and suspicious, but what we have to understand is when it comes to Western science and it comes to, like the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C., or Oxford University and Cambridge University, they follow set academic patterns when it comes to their various researches.
Mm,
And anything that's outside those parameters of learning, they will not touch, they will ignore,
yeah.
they will sideline, they will ridicule, and they won't bother making any effort to give it any kind of academic consideration. And that's the way the editing process occurs when it comes to the version of the 3D holographic reality in the material dimension that has been presented to us, inverted commas, as factual.
Mm.
So
I think the biggest link to all this information and Tartaria all around the world is it all comes back to the ether. It all comes back to this,
Yeah,
the energy
boundless
systems.
telluric electricity all around us,
Mm,
and the what is around us when we think of the atmosphere around planet Earth.
mm,
It's far more tangible than most individuals realize,
yeah,
and yet we have this perception that we're given by Western science that it is this invisible sort of nothingness. It's just this kind of, it hasn't got any real sort of solidified, so,
mm,
tangibility, but it really is far more tangible than most individuals realize, and we're interacting with it far more than most
yes.
individuals realize.
Yeah, and
And
we're all influencing that as well. Our consciousness, the way our minds are expanding, we're sending frequencies out all the time.
we should be focusing more on that than people trying to pinpoint and say, oh, well, the Great Wall of China is really the Great Wall of, Tartaria.
Yeah,
When it's not, it's just more diversions, and it's just basically expending energy and cognitive efforts in all the wrong areas, and it's wasting huge amounts of time. And any individual, as I said, that puts out the notion in any interviews they do, or says anything about the Great Wall of China being somehow part of Great Tartary and the old world empire, is either woefully ignorant and spreading disinformation, and if they are aware of its historical narrative, then they're spreading misinformation, and they're just basically causing confusion in the minds of the viewers.
yeah. And that's what we don't want. We've already had enough confusion. We want
Mm.
clarity. As we just said, we don't want to go into these subjects too much, but we wanted to cover this because I felt it was
Yeah.
quite important in
It's
the
a mundane,
information.
it is a mundane subject, but that's why I wanted it, like you, I wanted to cover the Great Wall of China, because
Yeah,
it doesn't have that sort of fantastical sense that you get when you think of, like the ether or the boundless telluric electricity and
yeah,
free energy systems coming out of Great Tartaria in northern Russia. But
yeah,
it's because it's been turned into a fantastical subject in its own right by many conspiracy theorists that just want to basically say, yeah, that's Great Tartaria. Yeah, that was from Great Tartaria. We're trying to demonstrate here, you've got to do the research yourself. You've got to make that effort
yeah,
and look at the historical narratives. Otherwise, it all becomes ridiculous. It becomes very confusing. And you've got a lot of people saying, yes, I'm right, you're wrong. And then some the other people saying, no, I'm right, you're wrong. It's all this egocentric battling going on in
yeah.
the alternative media and the New Age movement, especially when it comes to subjects like Great Tartary and the Old World Empire. So we're trying to give a constant balanced approach to the information, and that's all I've got to say. So there you go.
That's brilliant, Steve, and thank you, my brother. It's great, and everybody watching this, that's the way that we've got to look into is look at this energy, the ether, look at how this is working, and how we can reintegrate this as well. Because the more we understand it, the more that awareness grows, the more this information will grow, and it will actually we will understand it. The science and conditioning that we've had over probably the last 300 years, I'd say has
Yeah.
really kind of put us into this certain mindset that gives us it almost blocks us from being able to see certain things. But
Well, you could say this though, is that when it was called, in mainland Europe, they called the out of what was the European Renaissance, I suppose, came the Age of Enlightenment. But I'll say yes, to some extent. That's what you need to,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
because
right,
other things were edited and concealed in this
certainly was.
so-called Age of Enlightenment, and obviously that interconnects with what it became the World Fairs, the Industrial Revolution, and then it's almost a collective psyop in the
Yeah,
minds of many conspiracy theorists, where they're so suspicious of everything that appears factual from Western science. They just say, well, that must have come from Great Tartaria then. Oh, that's from Great Tartaria. And it all it does is adds further confusion and disorientation, and creates more egocentric battling, and individuals who are watching the videos are criticizing each other. And there's a
yeah,
lot of time wasting then going on. We should all be focusing on, subjects really like the Christ consciousness, self-empowerment,
Yes.
and really focusing on what's going to happen from 2034, 2035 onwards,
Mm.
with the emergence of this new golden age or golden period for Homo sapiens or human beings on planet Earth. It's going to be a wonderful, wonderful time ahead. So let's focus on these things and
Yeah.
less on all these historical inaccuracies that so many individuals seem to be getting mixed up with.
And we will be doing a lot more on all the kind of ether and talking about that more as well. As we said, we
Yes.
just wanted to cover this for everybody. So, this goes out in a positive way and actually people do start actually researching instead of just watching superficial videos on YouTube and accepting narratives that are
Yeah.
distortions. And
Yeah.
so thank you, Stephen. That's been
That's all
amazing, bro.
right.
And really good information. And we have our book available, Luminous Worlds, in paperback and ebook, and that's on Amazon. And yeah, Stephen, thank you. It's always a pleasure talking with you. And my brain expands the more we speak. So, but the way we started these podcasts, and we were literally having a conversation and we just wanted to bring these conversations to you, the audience, and look at
Yeah.
what they've grown to. And this is what everybody can do, and everybody can talk about this information. So, talk
Yes.
about it with your friends and family, even if they do have opposing views, believe us, both me and Stephen, we don't always get the best response from our family. They do sometimes have opposing views. So that's fine. That's
Most
what we
individuals do. That's the whole purpose of dialogue and conversation, isn't it?
And that's right. And we're meant to have this. So we're just bringing this information out. And Stephen's research is just groundbreaking and brilliant stuff, Steve. And
That's
it's
right.
a bye for me.
And it's goodbye for me.